is CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Paul Barber. Our top stories this hour. Ukraine says fighting is intensifying on the eastern front line as Moscow and Kiev accuse each other of shelling. Flooding and landslides caused by a week of torrential rain kill 37 in South Korea and leave more than 10 missing. US climate envoy John Kerry arrives in Beijing for talks. He's the third high-level American official to visit China in a month. And France pays tribute to acting and singing icon Jane Birkin, who inspired the famous Birkin bag after her death at the age of 76. Ukraine says fighting in the east of the country has somewhat intensified as Ukrainian and Russian forces clash in at least 3 areas on the front line. Kiev says that Russian shelling has killed a civilian in the Kharkiv region, while both sides have accused each other of shelling a village near Zaporizhia where several people were injured. Russia says it's thwarted a Ukrainian attack on a major Crimean Navy port. The country's defense ministry says 9 drones were shot down over the Black Sea. Meanwhile, President Vladimir Putin says that Moscow has a sufficient stockpile of cluster bombs and says it reserves the right to use them if necessary. Our correspondent Dasha Chernysheva is in Moscow for us now. So what more can you tell us, Dasha, about this thwarted attack on Crimea?
According to Russia's Ministry of Defense, 7 aerial and 2 underwater drones have been detected and destroyed by the Russian armed forces. And Moscow accuses Kyiv of attempting to carry out what Moscow describes as a terrorist attack against the Crimean Peninsula. We understand from the local officials that they have been attempting to hit the area near the Sevastopol harbor. And of course, Russia insists that all the attacks have been repelled. That's a good sign. And Russia is not for the first time repelling all of those attacks. But we also understand that for some time, for a few hours in the early hours of Sunday, maritime traffic has been disrupted and suspended, including some passenger ferries. We also have heard from the Russian Ministry of Defense that the 2 unmanned underwater vehicles were discovered in the northern part of the Black Sea and destroyed by fire. Some of others have been destroyed at a great distance from the Crimean Peninsula, and others have been also destroyed by the have been jammed by the Russian forces. We also have heard about some other attacks taking place against the Russian territory, particularly in the Belgorod region. MLR grads were used, according to the local governor, against the villages near the border with Ukraine. So certainly a lot to be following today as we keep hearing from about more drone attacks against the Russian soil.
Yes, and Dasha, Russia says that it's got the right to take reciprocal action if cluster munitions are used against its forces in Ukraine. What can you tell us about that?
That's right. Russian President Vladimir Putin has said today that Russia has the right and will reserve this right should Ukraine be using the cluster munitions in the area of the so-called special military operation. Then Russia will do the same. For months now, Moscow says it has been refraining from the use of cluster munitions in the area of the special military operation, and it has been saying that the decision of the United States to actually allow Ukraine to use this type of military means was definitely described by the White House itself, saying that was actually a crime. So everybody understands how detrimental those cluster munitions are for the civilian population, particularly in the area of the special military operation. But Russia says the United States didn't have much choice because the country is running out of other ammunition, while Russia, according to the Russian President Vladimir Putin, has a lot of cluster munitions for all kinds in stock. So Russia says definitely it will be forced to use these type of munitions to defend its armed forces in the area of the special military operation.
Ukraine and Poland, Dasha, have said that the Wagner Group fighters have arrived in Belarus. What do we know about that?
Well, a couple of days ago, we have heard Belarusian Ministry of Defense actually confirming that they have out a roadmap for the training of the Belarusian servicemen by the Wagner fighters. Alexander Lukashenko, the president of Belarus, who actually brokered the deal between the Wagner Group and the Kremlin, said that the combat experience of the Wagner fighters will be useful in Belarus because they have this first-hand experience, and that's why the decision has been taken that the fighters of the Wagner Group will be training the Belarusian servicemen in a number of different disciplines. And we have seen the footage released already of those training taking place. But also we have heard today and seen on social media many reports and the footage of the Wagner columns moving along the Don 4 highway, which from the direction of Ukraine towards the direction of Belarus. This is, according to the reports, the equipment and the cars of the Wagner Group. It's not clear whether they will be going to those abandoned military compounds in Belarus that have been offered them by the Belarusian president, or perhaps they could have some other plans. But certainly we understand that there is no prosecution of the Wagner Group in Russia, neither the fighters themselves nor the head of the group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, as there was a meeting taking place on the 29th of June between the president of Russia and the Wagner Group, in which the Wagner fighters have been offered several employment options. One of those, according to the Kremlin, was that the Wagner fighters could actually continue working as a single unit under their existing battlefield commander.
Dasha Chinosheva in Moscow, thank you. The last ship to travel under a UN-brokered grain deal has left the Ukrainian port of Odessa. The deal covered the safe transit of Ukrainian grain through the Black Sea, but the agreement with Russia expires on Monday. Moscow has not agreed to an extension. Vladimir Putin told his South African counterpart Cyril Ramaphosa that commitments to remove obstacles to Russian food and fertilizer exports had not been fulfilled. In other news, a Palestinian gunman opened fire on a car in the occupied West Bank on Sunday, injuring an Israeli man and his 2 daughters. It's the latest violence in a tense situation, which escalated after Israeli forces attacked the Jenin refugee camp, killing 12 Palestinians and wounding 100 others. Israel says the raids are an attempt to root out groups responsible for attacks on Israeli citizens. A search is underway for a man who shot dead 4 people in the southern US state of Georgia. Police issued a $10,000 reward for information leading to an arrest of the suspect. 3 men and a woman were gunned down in a suburb of Hampton. Investigators believe there were 4 different shooting locations. The Hampton County Sheriff described the attack as a senseless crime. Flooding and landslides caused by a week of torrential rain in South Korea have killed 37 people and left more than 10 people missing. Our correspondent Jack Barton has more now from the hardest-hit province.
This was the village of Yecheon to the southeast of the South Korean capital, Seoul. The wall of mud that hit this village was so strong it flattened everything in its path.
The rescue team, you can see, working in the mud over there, has just found the remains of one more victim of this mudslide, and they've sent the heavy machinery away, and now they're just waiting on a stretcher crew to come in and take the victim away.
Moments later, the team arrives. One more death in a small village where everyone has grown up together.
I don't feel good. I feel like death. I force myself to walk, and I force myself to eat. I force myself to live.
Locals gather at a nearby community center. Inside, a picture of happier times.
There are 5 people dead, and other people don't have a house. We are gathering here because we have to eat and we have to sleep.
Emergency services as well as volunteer organizations have gathered in this village to try and help find the people who are still missing, often using the most rudimentary tools such as steel poles to probe through the mud.
The community center also serves as a base for the rescuers, who have to navigate what's left of the broken road to the upper village on foot.
On top of the terrible loss of life
The torrential rains that South Korea has seen over the past week have also caused extensive damage to infrastructure and food crops. There will no doubt be a clean-up bill in the billions of dollars once the rains finally stop. Until then, the priority is to continue to evacuate thousands of people away from danger spots and continue searching for the missing. Jack Barton, CGTN, Yecheon, South Korea.
At least 2,000 people have been evacuated as forest fire burns out of control on the Spanish Canary island of La Palma. The fire has spread over 4,500 hectares of land. Spain suffered an exceptionally dry spring, with March and April seeing record high temperatures and low rainfall. Many parts of southern Spain saw temperatures over 40 degrees Celsius last week, as Europe was gripped by a heat wave. Even higher temperatures are expected this coming week across southern Europe. The US climate envoy John Kerry has arrived in Beijing at the start of a 4-day visit to China. Kerry is the third high-level American official to visit China in a month. The Chinese Foreign Ministry says the two sides will exchange views on collaboration to address climate change. And this is John Kerry's third visit to China as US climate envoy. Our correspondent Sun Tianyuan reports.
U.S. climate envoy John Kerry has arrived in Beijing for a 4-day visit, and Kerry is set to meet his Chinese counterpart Xie Zhenhua for talks on climate cooperation and addressing issues on clean energy. They're also likely to discuss how their countries can promote the upcoming UN climate change conference in November. Now, Kerry's visit marks the resumption of formal climate talks between China and the U.S. after a year-long halt. The suspension was part of Beijing's response to former U.S. Housekeeper Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan last August, which seriously fractured ties and mutual trust. The U.S. Special Envoy's visit underscores the urgency of climate collaboration between the world's two largest greenhouse gas emitters. China and the U.S. had sound cooperation over the years, and one of their biggest achievements was helping conclude the 2015 Paris Agreement. John Kerry is the third senior U.S. official to visit China over the past month, and following U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen's visit last week and Secretary of State Antony Blinken in June. On Thursday, senior Chinese diplomat Wang Yi spoke again with Blinken on the sidelines of the ASEAN Plus foreign ministers' meetings in Indonesia. It was their second meeting within a month. So there's a general belief that these frequent high-level exchanges point to a thaw in China-U.S. relations. However, political experts believe more concrete actions are needed to ease tensions and achieve tangible results. Well, this cannot be done overnight, of course, as the world's two largest economies still have multiple disputes and broader geopolitical issues that need to be addressed. Whether Kerry's current trip can help restore stability between Beijing and Washington and how much real progress can be made remains to be seen over the next few days.
Sun Tianyuan there reporting from Beijing. Well, Alice Hill is David Rubenstein's Senior Fellow for Energy and the Environment at the U.S. Council on Foreign Relations.
Look, we have the two largest emitters, the two largest economies, and they are both contributing significantly to the climate change crisis. These two powers need to work together to find solutions, and time is running out. So this is a crucial meeting to make sure that both nations are on track to cut their emissions.
So the stakes, as you say, could not be higher, but with global inflation, the Ukraine conflict and the energy crisis all making efforts to get to net zero much, much harder, how can these superpowers actually talking lead to tangible change?
Well, that's the hard thing, isn't it? Other events intervene. Climate change is a slow-moving crisis. Of course, now it has manifested itself in China and the United States in floods, in heat, in drought. These two nations need to prioritize climate change going forward. It used to be thought that this was a threat for the distant future. It's a threat for now, so it needs to be treated like the other threats that are unfolding across the globe and have urgent action.
And Secretary Kerry's visit comes hot on the heels of other high-profile trips to China by the Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Janet Yellen, the US Treasury Secretary. How is the dial moving, do you think, in terms of the tone of dialogue between China and the United States?
It seems to be improving. There's a recognition that these two nations, in terms of global stability, need to find a path forward where they can talk about different issues. Climate change is a carve-out in that, in my opinion, and Secretary Kerry, and now Special Envoy Kerry, has treated it like that. That this has to be an issue that is above the normal or the other issues that are capturing the attention of leaders of both countries. I hope progress in China joining with the United States in figuring out a path forward. There are certainly a number of ways that they could focus, or things they could focus on. Methane, reducing that very fast-acting greenhouse gas pollution, as well as deforestation, and of course coal, when we're talking about China and the United States.
And finally, in terms of boosting the green technology industries in the United States, do you think China will be looking to the Biden administration for examples of how governments can act? And do you think that Washington would be looking at what China is doing too?
Well, certainly the United States is looking at what China is doing in terms of the supply of critical minerals, because in order to achieve the green transition, we're going to need to have access to critical minerals. And of course, China has the greatest access, the greatest control over those minerals. But I think that we will see other areas where there will be focus between the two countries to try to find common ground, including, I hope, providing incentives to different corporations and technologies to jumpstart the way forward on reducing harmful emissions, whether it's pulling carbon out of the air or simply converting to green energy like wind and solar, which China has definitely shown the rest of the world can be quickly done.
US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says that she's keen to work with China on areas of mutual interest. She made the comment at a press conference before a meeting of G20 finance ministers and central bankers in India.
As the world's two largest economies, we have an obligation to the people in our nations and in the world to cooperate on areas of mutual concern. Last week's visit served as a step forward in putting our relationship on a surer footing and establishing a resilient and productive channel of communication. There's much more work to do, but I believe this trip was an important start. I'm eager to build on the groundwork that we laid in Beijing to mobilize further action.
And you're watching CGTN. Still ahead. Members of the Indo-Pacific Trade Bloc, the CPTPP, welcomed the United Kingdom as the group's 12th and newest member during their meeting in New Zealand. And reversing the death of the high street, how a small Austrian city has managed to revitalise its town centre.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
There's a new agenda for a new world, accelerating change in almost every part of our lives. It's shifting the norms of how we work, travel, and connect. How we think, interact, and develop. It's a new reality, a new agenda with me, Juliette Mann.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
This week on Razor, creating the power of the sun
We will have endless energy. Could replace the oil. It will for sure change our life, change the world a lot. We are working on this project. It's like when human learn how to use fire. This is the second fire of the human in our history.
Hello there, welcome back. A reminder of our headlines. Ukraine says fighting is intensifying on the eastern front line as Moscow and Kiev accuse each other of shelling. Flooding and landslides caused by a week of torrential rain killed 37 in South Korea, leaving more than 10 people missing. And US climate envoy John Kerry arrives in Beijing for talks. He's the third high-level American official to visit China in a month. The United Kingdom has officially joined the Indo-Pacific Trade Bloc, the CPTPP. Members are meeting in New Zealand, where they are also looking into China's application to join. Our correspondent, Owen Poland, is in Auckland.
I'm overlooking New Zealand's biggest container terminal here in Auckland, and it's expected to get a whole lot busier now that the United Kingdom has joined the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Earlier today, the UK Trade Secretary officially signed an agreement that makes the United Kingdom the 12th member nation of this trading bloc, and New Zealand's Trade Minister says that will give New Zealand exporters unprecedented access to the world's 6th largest economy. The UK's participation means that 99.5% of New Zealand exports will now be able to enter the UK duty-free, and it's predicted that our exports there could grow by 50% once the deal comes into force. From the UK's perspective, membership of the Trans-Pacific Partnership will give it access to one of the world's largest trading blocs, consisting of 500 million people across the Asia-Pacific region. Almost 100% of the goods exported from the UK will now be eligible for zero tariffs, and that's expected to create jobs and opportunities for businesses across the United Kingdom. New Zealand's Trade Minister also says that having a G7 economy like the United Kingdom inside the CPTPP brings the Atlantic to the Indo-Pacific and boosts supports for the rules-based trading system in this part of the world. China applied to join the Trans-Pacific Partnership almost 2 years ago, and it's one of several countries, including Ukraine, who are hoping to follow the UK into the pact. China's Vice Minister of Commerce says that China's membership would give the partnerships, or would boost rather, the partnership's consumer base from 500 million to 1.5 billion people, and it would also expand the combined GDP of the member nations from 10 trillion US dollars to something like 16 trillion. Chinese officials also say that joining the partnership would boost economic integration in the Asia-Pacific region and also bring tangible benefits to all the participating countries as they recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. However, some observers believe that the UK's membership is more strategic than it is economic, and that the UK could side with Japan and try to veto China's membership. It's understood that China's membership application was being discussed today by the member nations. However, there's no word yet on any progress. So we're going to have to wait and see how the economic rivalry between the different countries plays out.
Owen Poland in Auckland. The Prime Minister of Iraq is in Syria in what is the first trip by an Iraqi premier since the Syrian civil war broke out in 2011. Mohammed Shia al-Sudani held talks with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. His trip is expected to focus on bolstering security along the two countries' shared border and further economic ties. Baghdad and Damascus have long-standing economic, military and political ties. Now, a problem facing many cities across Europe is how to prevent historic town centres from dying out when customers prefer to shop online or at large suburban retailers. Our correspondent Johannes Plesberger reports from a small Austrian city which brought in several measures to reverse the trend.
This farmers' market in Eisenstadt is just one initiative designed to keep shoppers in the town centre.
old school.
I'm old school. I like it better here in the historic centre than in a big shopping mall where everything is so suffocating.
I like the flair in the inner city more, so I prefer that. But of course, if I have to do some quick shopping, I prefer to do it outside because it's just easier to find parking spaces.
As traffic increased in the 1980s, stores began to move to the outskirts of Austrian towns where they built large parking lots. Today, the country has Europe's fastest rate of land consumption. 13 hectares are being built on every day. At the same time, many town centers have died out. To reverse this trend, Eisenstadt hired Margit Sommer. The marketing manager started to plant more trees in the pedestrian area and created regular events and street markets.
I grew up in a restaurant business myself, right here in this street. And that's why I care about revitalizing the downtown area. And when you see how everyone is getting involved and things are really changing, that just makes the job fun.
In 2016, the town in eastern Austria counted 18 vacant shops. This number has now been cut by 2/3.
If you want to reduce vacant spaces, then our so-called downtown bonus is certainly a good measure. We financially support new businesses in the first 3 years after they open a store.
One of the recipients of this shop opening bonus is a local goldsmith. Katarina Podpera's business, which is unique in the area, benefits from a $1,000 per month subsidy in the first year, with about half that amount for the following 2 years.
I wouldn't have dared to take a leap and just open a business without any help. The downtown bonus was definitely a pleasant cushion of support.
However, revitalizing the old town comes at a price. All in all, Eisenstadt estimates that the measures have cost around $1 million. Meanwhile, word of the town's success has spread, with others in Austria adopting similar measures as they fight against the death of High Street. Johannes Bleschberger, CGTN, Eisenstadt, Austria.
The actress and singer Jane Birkin, who inspired the famous Birkin bag by the French luxury house Hermès, has died at the age of 76. Birkin was born in London but shot to fame in France. Her hit single, Je t'aime moi non plus, that she recorded with her then-husband Serge Gainsbourg, made her a worldwide star. French President Emmanuel Macron paid tribute, describing Birkin as a French icon who embodied freedom. And finally, the Wimbledon men's final showdown is underway, with the world's #1 Carlos Alcaraz delivering a testy game for defending champion Novak Djokovic. Serbian Djokovic eased his way through the first set, but 20-year-old Alcaraz has delivered the winning blow to finish off a captivating second set and hold on to the lead in the third one. Djokovic is looking to secure his 8th title in the tournament and an overall 24th Grand Slam title. Spaniard Alcaraz is playing his first Wimbledon final. Nail-biting stuff. Well, the headlines again here on CGTN. Ukraine says fighting is intensifying on the eastern front line as Moscow and Kiev accuse each other of shelling. Flooding and landslides caused by a week of torrential rain killed 37 in South Korea, leaving more than 10 people missing. And US climate envoy John Kerry arrived in Beijing for talks. He's the third high-level American official to visit China in a month. And that is The World Today. Thank you for watching. There's more on CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app, or you can scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. And there's more news at the top of the hour. Up next, it's Razor. For now, from all the team in London, goodbye.